Hi, in this unit we're going to be looking at Alaska's geography and just to get a better idea for where the Kenai Peninsula fits into Alaska's geography and where Alaska fits into the broader world, just want to take a look at this Google Earth display of the peninsula and then of the state. So we're going to start out looking at the peninsula and looking at the different schools that are served by this distance learning office, and also maybe look a little bit about the areas where the rest of the schools in the peninsula are. Now you'll notice there are push pins on this map, and if we start at the southern end of the peninsula, we'll see we have two schools here, one being Nanwalek and one being Port Graham, and those schools are actually quite close together. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, and you'll see that Port Graham is just up a small bay. Actually, it's up this bay right here, Port Graham. There's a school located right there. And then as you go back out and are just around the corner is Nanwalek. So there's two schools there. And then a little bit further north and slightly east is Seldovia. This area of water is actually going into the Kachemak Bay. Most people would say Kachemak Bay starts roughly inside this line. And when you come to this side of this area, so if we draw a line from this point to here, we'd be talking about Kachemak Bay being in here and the Cook Inlet being out here. And there's a line dividing them there. From Seldovia, we would cross the bay to Homer. So you can either take a boat from Homer or you can fly. Homer High School is in this area here. And then if we continue up the bay, we would come to Voznesenka. And there's other schools out here, Kachemak Silo and Razdolna. Nikolaevsk, a little further north, near Anchor Point. Anchor Point is out on the edge here. And we drive back to Nikolaevsk. Zoom out a little bit here and move us slightly north. And you'll see Ninilchik along the coast. And as we continue traveling north, we would run into Soldotna. This is the Soldotna area. And the distance learning office is located in Soldotna, near Soldotna Middle School and Soldotna High School. If we continue following north, we would run into Nikiski High School, way out to the western part of the northwestern part of the peninsula. Going to move our map just a little bit again, and you see if we cross the water from Nikiski and travel slightly further north, we come to the Tyonek School, or Tabona. Back onto the mainland of the peninsula, we run into Hope, a small school there in Hope. You'll read about Hope, but when we get into the gold portion of the state, gold mining was important to the beginning of Hope. And Anchorage, you'll see I have Anchorage push pinned here. Anchorage is not part of the Kenai Peninsula, and it's not part of our school district, but I wanted to include it there just to give an idea of the relationship, how far away Anchorage is. Hope is actually very close to Anchorage in a straight line, but to drive from Hope to Anchorage, you need to go quite a ways east, then around the corner, and drive back into Anchorage. So it's actually further away than it looks on the map. And finally, we have Seward High School on the east side of the peninsula. Notice that is the only school on the eastern side of the peninsula. There are not many settlements over here. In fact, Seward would be the only actual settlement on the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula. So that gives a little bit of a feel for where our towns are in relationship to each other. Now I'm just going to take some measurements, and if we measure from Hope to, let's say, Nanwalek. So there I started at Nanwalek. We go to Hope, and that is about 130 miles. So from the furthest north to the furthest south schools, about 130 miles. Of course, that's a straight line, 130 miles. It's quite a bit further than that if you were trying to drive. And of course, to get to Nanwalek from Port Graham, you'd have to take a boat or an airplane to finish out that trip. Now back to our map. I'm going to zoom out to give an idea of the peninsula in relation to the rest of the state. So here's our push pins that are now quite crowded, and you'll see just to the south of the peninsula is the Kodiak archipelago, or Kodiak Island. There's actually a series of islands here, and we have Kodiak, the town of Kodiak, on this eastern side of those islands. Now you'll notice almost directly west from us is Bethel. Now that's quite a ways west from us. Again, if we want to put a ruler on it, just real quickly, from Bethel to, well, it'll just come over here somewhere. We're looking at about 350 miles to Bethel, and of course that's also an airplane flight. We couldn't take a boat directly there, or it would not be very efficient to do so, but we could fly there. There are no roads going to Bethel from this area. Looking further south, we go out along the Aleutian Islands. We run into Unalaska. That would be a familiar place if you watch the show Deadliest Catch. Unalaska is also the home of Dutch Harbor, and Dutch Harbor, of course, is where the crab boats often get ready to go fishing and return after their crab fishing. So we see Dutch Harbor quite a bit on the Deadliest Catch, and that's what's real famous about that area. And as those boats leave Dutch Harbor, they travel north and slightly west out into the Bering Sea. Got St. Paul Island out there. Then we move south, we go to Adak, and as we look north, we would find Nome, another town you'll read about when we talk about the Alaska gold mining and gold rush. We have Fairbanks, and finally, way up north is Barrow. And again, distances are interesting. If we look at Barrow all the way to the southern end of the peninsula, and this is an approximation, but a straight shot is over 800 miles to get from Barrow down to the southern end of the peninsula. So that's quite a long distance. And we look over into the southeastern part of the state. We have Juneau with the push pin. And if we zoom out even a little further, we can see a push pin for Seattle. So as we fly to Seattle, and probably a lot of us have flown out of the state, and usually if you fly out of the state, you do go to Seattle. And so we would be leaving typically from Anchorage, sometimes from Fairbanks, but leaving from here and traveling straight to Seattle. And then from there, we would be bouncing off to different areas in the country, or even down to Mexico, or back into Canada. Juneau, Alaska's capital, is closer to Seattle, but it's actually about the same process. You can't get to Juneau by road, so you would have to either fly or take the ferry through the Inside Passage down to Seattle. And by the same token, if we from the peninsula want to go to Juneau, we would need to either take the ferry or take an airplane. And that is just a general idea of how the peninsula, how our schools are related to each other geographically, how the peninsula relates to the rest of the state, how the state relates to the rest of the country, to Canada, and even to the rest of the world.